We're here today with Judge Cruz, who is a judge on the Arizona Court of Appeals Division 1. We're here today with the Los Abogados Appointments Committee Meet the Bench program. I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much, Judge Cruz, for being with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to talk with us and help us to understand a little bit more about your path to the bench and just some information for people watching who may be interested in working at the court or applying for the bench at some point in their career. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it, and hopefully my story will resonate with some people out there, and will encourage them to follow through with their dream if this is what they're hoping to do.
Great. All right, we'll start with some questions about your background. So, where are you originally from?
I was born in New York. My mother is from the Dominican Republic and my father is from Puerto Rico, and they met in New York as many immigrants, which Puerto Ricans are sort of somewhere in the middle because they're U.S. citizens, but my mother, certainly an immigrant from a third world country, came to work and to be able to help her family, and my parents met there and I was born there. And then after a few years we moved to Puerto Rico, and at the age of 14 we moved to Yuma, Arizona.
Okay, and what brought your family to Yuma?
My father was hired with the Border Patrol, and so that was his assigned post.
Okay, and then where did you go to undergrad?
I started at a local community college in Yuma.
Okay.
I was not, for a lot of reasons, my parents didn't really have a plan for me to go to college and to become professional. The plan was different, probably get married and do service in my church. And so one of the things that my mother did encourage was that I obtain probably an associate's in secretarial type of work so that I could support myself if need be, but not really make a career out of it. So I started at Arizona Western College, and as I attended school there, I had a couple of different jobs because I paid for my own education all the way through. And so one of the jobs that I had put me in contact with a woman who worked at an elementary school. And she said, and that's the age of trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. And so she said, you speak Spanish, they'd probably hire you at the school where I work. So I applied and I was hired, and that was when I started to narrow my focus of what was important for me in terms of the work that I was going to do in life. And what I learned there was that it was important for me to do something that was meaningful. Meaningful in the sense that I was impacting other people's lives. And while I was in that process, and I worked that job at the elementary school, I still worked at the store where I met this woman, and I worked at the jewelry counter. And I remember selling the biggest piece, the biggest diamond cocktail ring we had, and just feeling like it did not give me the sense of satisfaction that I thought it would. I felt like, well, I'm going to make a big commission, but other than that, nothing in the world is different or better for it. I mean, this is it. I'm just going to make some money and nothing more. Whereas working at the school, having contact with the kids, it was a high-needs school. And having that contact I knew was important. I knew that for some of these kids, contact with me could be the best thing that happened in their entire day and could impact the rest of their lives if I did a good job at my duties. And so from there, I started thinking about what other things I could do more than do secretarial work. In that process, I also had a car accident and had a moment of thinking that I was going to die. And sort of coming out of that, gave myself permission to do anything. I asked myself if I could do anything at all, what would I do? And setting aside any limitations that my parents may have had because of their limited experiences in life or any others. And so I told myself I'd be a doctor or a lawyer. And then I narrowed it down from there further. Thought, well, getting into people's body cavities, not so much my cup of tea. Probably arguing about it is more like my personality. And my dad used to say jokingly that I should be a lawyer because of the way that I argued a point. So I finished at that point at Arizona Western College, transferred to U of A, finished undergrad and law school at U of A.
Okay. One day, it wasn't just one day this is going to happen. It was kind of a culmination of experiences that led you there.
Right. And so I, as many others, didn't have lawyers in my family, and had never had exposure to a lawyer until I had that big accident. And so first, it was very difficult to find someone to represent me in a small community where the opposing party was an agricultural company. And so when I was able to find someone, well, my dad really found someone to represent me, I remember reflecting on that a great deal, how it is that how difficult it is for someone in a rural community to find representation. And then once I did, I just had all of these sort of big perspective questions. And so here I am sitting across the desk from this lawyer, and he's talking about the case and how we might be able to settle it. And I'm just thinking of where I am in my life at that point, working at the school. As much as I had developed and grown that passion for teaching and for doing something meaningful, I also, 4 years I had been at the school by now, and I also learned the difficulties of being a teacher. And I learned to do enough math to figure out that this degree was going to cost thousands of dollars, and what was my salary going to be as a teacher? And so I realized that to be able to live at the same standard of living that my parents had given me, which was not, we weren't rich, but we were middle class. And so I realized that that was only going to be possible with my salary as a teacher. If I married someone else, mine would be supplemental income, but I wouldn't be able to support myself completely. And so I'm thinking of all of these things. And so here I am across from this attorney, and I remember thinking, here is someone who is doing something really meaningful, someone who affects people's lives with the work he does. Here's someone who, if from the work that he's doing, if I use those resources that I'm going to get in a smart way, I'm going to be able to change the course of my life. And I thought, and he's going to take a third of that. He's first shuffling some papers on his desk. What is this? so I asked him, I said, so what do you have to do to be a lawyer? And the first words out of his mouth, I did not construe them in the way that I do now with the experience that I have in life. But the first thing he said, and I understand him from a different time, different generation, but he said, the law is a difficult profession for a woman. And I remember thinking, I don't think he understands what I'm asking, because I'm not asking whether he thinks that I can do this. I'm asking logistically, 1, 2, 3, how do you get this law degree? How do you get to sit across the desk and participate in my case in this way? And so finally he did say, well, finished bachelor's and then 3 years of law school, the bar, and that's that. And I thought, okay, well, I've completed 2 years of undergrad, so I have 2 more of undergrad and 3, okay, that's 5 years. So I went to work that day and I put in my resignation. I said, I'm not coming back next year because I'm going to go to law school. And the reaction, and this is something that's now when I talk to young people who are hopefuls, lawyer hopefuls, I pause and I reflect on this, because the reaction that I got when I went to the school and told the teachers there that I was going to go to law school was not what I had hoped for. It wasn't just all, yes, this is fantastic, you will do it. It was more along the lines of, sure you are, that's great. Why don't you take a sabbatical instead of resigning? Because, and I said, well, a sabbatical is a year. I'm going to be gone 5 years. And they said, well, in case things happen. And it took me a while to figure out, oh, you think I might fail. And so at that time, I like to take advice from people who've been there and seen more than I had. Even when I was young, that was always a trademark. So I said, okay, I pulled my resignation and I asked for a sabbatical, and a year later they called me. I was already in Tucson at the U of A, and they called and said, well, we're at that point where we need to know if you're coming back next year or not. And I said, I told you it was going to be 5 years, so that's 1 down and 4 to go. You can give away my position. So that's it did take a number of different things happening in my life for me to come to that point where and the exposure to an attorney for me to decide that this is something that I was going to do. And once I made that choice, having the confidence and knowing that it was up to me, it was completely up to me. And when people showed disbelief that this could happen because maybe I didn't look like the person who would go to law school. My parents weren't professionals. But I knew that if I went to school and if I completed the assignments and if I gave it my everything, then the other side of that, they'd have to give me the grade that would pass me on to the next. And, you know, you continue down this path. So my advice is always, once you've made that decision, then you have to be willing to commit to that and sacrifice anything that, almost anything that might get in the way of it.
Some people discount themselves in the process early on, and they think that they can't do it because they have X or Y in their past, or that they didn't do X or Y to get to where they need to be. So I think that's really valuable.
And you know, one of those things I'd like to highlight is the fact that I was one of those kids. I remember in high school when someone came to talk about different universities, anything career oriented, you know, I just kind of tuned out. That they weren't talking to me. And it's not because anyone told me, anyone in my family, anyone told me I couldn't do it. It's that no one told me I could. No one told me that this was a dream that I could have. And so it took having a major accident and being faced, I mean, literally gripping the wheel and thinking, this is when I die. This is when I'm going to find out what happens after death. And coming out of it still alive, that's when I gave myself permission. And it felt so liberating and daring to say, I'm going to be a lawyer. And it shocked a lot of people. And it was equally shocking when I came back, because I returned to Yuma to be a prosecutor, and I remember some people didn't know how to ask me. I ran into one of the teachers when I came back at the grocery store who said, last time I saw you, you were going to go to school to be a lawyer, right? And I said, yes. And he said, so how did that go? I said, really well. So, and I said, yes. So you graduated? Yes. So you're a lawyer? Yes. And it kind of, and he and everyone else, it seems like it took them a minute. I would just kind of wait, like, okay, sit back, let that sink in. And because of people's expectations of us, because people expect that lawyers typically are going to look a certain way, are going to come from a certain background. And so when you're not that, and you decide, I want to do that, I think that's for me, then you're sort of beating your own path and, you know, going against the grain. But it was absolutely worth it. It was the best decision I made. I can't think of a career better suited for me than the law. You mentioned earlier how much you love being a lawyer. I can't tell you how much I agree with that. Everything I have done in the law, being a prosecutor, doing defense work, having my own practice, on the bench, I have loved every different experience. And people often ask me, what did you like better, being a prosecutor, being a defense attorney, being a judge? They've all been very different sides of this process and of this machinery. And I can see myself doing other aspects of it, but I can't see myself doing anything outside of the law because I love it so much.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the logistics to getting to the bench, so where you are today. And so you mentioned you did, and I think your bio represents, you did prosecution, you did defense, and you had your own practice for a period of time. What was it that inspired you to apply to the bench?
Well, I didn't think that I would apply to the bench as young as I did. I was very young, and I was enjoying my practice as much as anybody can. I was doing defense work, some family law, mostly defense work, and civil as well. I was contacted by a local Indian tribe to be their judge, and they hired me as a pro tem, and that was my first exposure to judicial work. But I was doing that part-time and enjoying it very much. I think that work, when a position opened up on the Yuma County Superior Court, that work led others to see me as someone who could serve the community as a Superior Court judge. And so I was asked to run. There was a vacancy that was going to open up. Only one person was expressing an interest in running, and others thought that I would be a better candidate. So I was pulled aside, and my reaction literally was, what does that have to do with me? I'm doing what I love. I have my office. I have my family. Everything is right where it needs to be in my life. But one of the things that that lawyer pointed out to me, which I have a great deal of respect for him, and he said, are you going to think about your community that has given you so much? And if we go back to what inspired me to become a lawyer in the first instance, was that sense of wanting to serve and wanting to do something that was that contributed to the greater good. So at that point, it didn't take too much convincing, and I said, yes, I'll run, and that opened up a whole new chapter of work. That was a whole new adventure.
The process is different in Yuma. I said apply. I think there's a election process in Yuma versus Maricopa. I think they do the appointments process with the application, and then from that elected position, then how did you become interested in or get to the Court of Appeals?
Okay, well, let me say this, because I think if we really want to inform people on how to get to this position, it's important to say this, because in most of the counties in Arizona, judges are elected by popular vote, as opposed to the merit selection system, which is in the larger counties in Maricopa, Pima County, Pinal County, and one other county just was added this past November. But when I made that decision, first of all, I was, like I said, very young, and I was going to run for a seat on a court where no woman had ever been elected judge, no Latino had been elected judge, and no person of color had ever been elected judge. And I say those separately because not all Latinos are of color, right? So those were all characteristics that didn't make me the person that most would see as likely to be elected. I didn't let that stop me, because I knew that I was qualified, I knew that I would do a good job, and I knew that I could talk to people. But it did take a great deal of work to get my name out there. And I also was not a very politically involved person. I've never been very political. So for a person who wants to gain a seat on the bench in a county where judges are elected, it's important to decide what your party is going to be and get them to know who you are. That doesn't mean that you need to be turned into a completely political person, but they need to know who you are so that they can give you support. But in my case, I started very early with all the signs on the road, all the the billboards, the radio, TV. I did all of that. I attended many different events for both parties. I never, because I was not a very political person and I consider myself very middle of the road, I attended any function to where I was invited. So that's how I was able to be elected and be the first woman elected to the bench in Yuma. After that, I devoted all the energy that I could to fulfilling that promise that you make to the people when they elect you. I mean, it is trust that the community has put in you to decide over their most intimate questions of who's going to have this child, who's going to be able to put this child to bed at night every day of the week, how much child support is this person going to pay, crimes, who goes to prison, how long do they go to prison for. So I felt that I could not violate the trust that my community had placed in me, so I had to do the most that I could with that position. And to me, that meant not only doing the best job on the bench, but also doing the best job off, by being involved with commissions here in Phoenix. I was on various commissions with the Supreme Court, and so I would travel to Phoenix at least once a month for meetings, and I wanted to be that bridge between Yuma and Phoenix so that we wouldn't be some community in the corner of the state that's detached from what's happening here in the main. And so you're doing that work and you're just trying to serve to the best of your ability, and so then people kind of see what you're doing. And again, I was encouraged to apply when a vacancy, actually 2 vacancies opened for the Court of Appeals for judges actually who were from Yuma. Justice Gould, who is now on the Supreme Court, and Judge Pat Orozco, who is now retired. So when those vacancies opened up, then I applied and went through the merit selection process.
I wanted to talk about something else that we talked about before we actually started recording, which was the clerkship process with any judge or court in the state of Arizona. Can you talk a little bit about that, what you know about the logistics for applying, or what your message would be to people who are interested in that?
First of all, don't ever decide, the same as with applying to law school and pursuing a legal career, don't ever decide that you're not going to be selected. If this is something that you're interested in doing, then apply. There's an application process. I think the application is online. If not, you can ask career services at the different law schools. For some reason, we get a lot of applications from ASU Law, not as many from U of A Law. I'm a U of A grad, so I'd like to see a lot more, and I'm not the only one. Lots of other judges around here have expressed that they'd like to see more U of A applicants in our pool. But you make your application. We have a number of judges every year hiring law clerks. We go through the applications. Of course, we're looking for good writing. That's what we do. That's our bread and butter. We read and we write, and so good writing, good research, and interesting perspective, and someone who can be outspoken. Every time I hire law clerks, one of the things I tell them is, I don't want you to just agree with me on everything I say. I want you to try to challenge me. I want you to ask me questions. Why? Why is it this way? Why do you believe we should decide the matter in this way? So that we can have that exchange that is good for their growth, and it's also good for me to be firm on the decision that I'm proposing to the panel. So every year we're hiring. I usually hire what we call 2.5 clerks, because I share one clerk with another judge. So that's the process.
That would be an interesting question for people who are watching, why, if there is an issue, whether it's housing, whether it's travel, whatever it is that is preventing more U of A students from applying, it'd be interesting to know, what the challenges are, so that if there's a solution for them, we could come up with them. I mean, whether it's scholarships, whether it's, whatever it may be, it'd be interesting to know.
Right, and also one of the things I'll say that's a benefit of serving here with us for a year with a clerkship is that we offer a very different experience from other courts, in the sense that the law clerk will be assisting with research and drafting memorandum decisions and opinions, but at the same time they also get to participate in our weekly conferences with the two other judges. So at conference, it's the 3 judges and all of our clerks, and we sit and we have an exchange, and law clerks present the drafts that they have prepared. They present the case, they answer questions, they can ask questions and just be fully engaged. So that's a perspective that is very unique to our court. Not all appellate courts offer that. In fact, I think that in most cases clerks are not invited to conferences.
Okay. All right. Any advice you want to give to either law students or people who are thinking about going to law school in general, or about people who are thinking about applying to the bench? Anything you'd like to say?
Absolutely. If you're thinking about going to law school, ask yourself why. Why do you want to do this? And if you're not whether you're clear on that or not, talk to lawyers, talk to different lawyers, and ask them about their quality of life, about what it is that they like about their work, what they don't like. And you'll hear all sorts of different opinions. When I was an undergrad, I remember I was in a pre-law fraternity, and we had a lawyer come visit, and he was the most unhappy lawyer I've ever seen. I mean, he said everything short of don't do it, you know, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And that was good. It was informative to see that there are some people who are just, it's not their calling. But I've seen enough of those for whom it is their calling and have not gone to law school, and it's something that never leaves them. Some people just are meant to be lawyers. So if you think you're one of those people, talk to other lawyers, shadow them, get involved and see if this is something that you see yourself doing. And if it is, then follow through. You know, take the next step. And I always say, don't look at the top of the mountain you're going to climb all the way to the top where you have to get, because you'll get dizzy and you'll probably fall off. Just look at the next stronghold, the next grab. What is it that I need to do today to eventually get there tomorrow? What has to happen today? Today I have to read, or I have to write a paper, or today I have to do this step, take this step. Similarly, for those who are interested in a judicial career, for those lawyers, I would say diversify, get different experiences, try different things within the law so that you will be a more attractive candidate. Get to know people, get to know your community, so that those people can then speak for you as to your character. That becomes one of the most important aspects of selecting a judge. Who are you? So start planting those seeds early. And of course, what we hear in law school from the very first day, what do they tell us? Your reputation begins here. And that is so true. It begins when you begin a law school. Even if you're not thinking initially that you might become a judge, opportunities open up at times when you least are expecting them. So just be always prepared for those opportunities whenever they may arise.
Thank you again for allowing me to come and shadow you and shadow our. And I just had 2 questions here. Can you think of a time in your career that you wanted just to kind of switch and be something else, or just this maybe a challenge in your life that you wanted just to switch careers?
I can think of many challenges along the path, but none that caused me to want to seek a different path, a different career. The law is so vast. There's so much you can do as a lawyer that there was enough for me to try to decide where I wanted to be within the law. So no, never did I think I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. No, it's a matter of, do I want to practice in civil? Do I want to be a prosecutor? And initially my goal was to be a career prosecutor. That's what I thought I was going to do once I was graduating from law school.
Okay. Now, I know one of my top questions that I came in, but it's how do you navigate personal conflict with what the law says? Like, just as far as in you thinking, almost double doubting yourself? I don't know, just...
Well, no doubt there are times when there are cases that are difficult to decide because the decision that is correct under the law doesn't feel good. It's not what you maybe would like to see happen personally, but the first tenet that you must remember is that as an elected official, as a judge, you've taken an oath, and it's an oath of loyalty to the law above all else, right? And so if I'm going to honor that, then I'm going to listen to the case with an open mind, look at what the law says, refer back to my research, debate it until I know what the correct answer is, until I get to that point. And I won't let it go until I get to that point where I know, like it or not, I know this is the right answer. When I get to that point, I'm comfortable knowing that I'm doing what the law requires of me. And so that is all I need, because I've been put in this place to uphold the law, not to push forward personal opinion or religious or otherwise, but to do what the law says. That's what a good servant does. So that's how I'm able to reconcile any personal discomfort I may feel about something, knowing that this is what the law requires. And when I adhere to the law, then I know that the community, right, is able to refer to the law and know what the result should be, so they can plan their lives and their contracts and their affairs in order with what the law says, without this concern that some judge might just insert her idiosyncrasies into the decision, because that would not be just.
Right. And last but not least is, how do you unwind at the end of the day? Like, how do you just like let your hair down, or just be like, without, you know, damaging your reputation or the way people see you, or, you know, I know in many cases you almost have to put some sort of like wall to not kind of step over your, you know, like just.
Well, I'll tell you, when I, here in Phoenix, it's a different experience than it was back home in Yuma. Yuma's a much smaller community, and when you're a judge 24/7. And I saw people in court in the morning, and then saw them at the grocery store in the afternoon. I saw people in court, and then I saw them at the school, at activities with their children, where my children went to school too. We were in the same community, and so judging is a different experience in a small community, but it is incredibly gratifying because the community feels the sense of ownership. You know, they selected you, they've kept you there, and they trust you. And so that's a beautiful relationship, and that's why Yuma will always be home for me. Here, there's a great deal of anonymity. I mean, I can walk outside right now and nobody will know who I am, which is great. I mean, I've had enough of the spotlight. Right. It's great. But how do I unwind? I do things with my family, with my friends. I like to hike. I like to run. I like to just get outdoors and just be with the people who I love.
Okay. Nice. And that's pretty much will wrap all my questions that I had.
Thank
At
you.
least for right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.